We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a 3rd grade education will tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, let me, since I haven't spoken on this, get a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. This is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. Good afternoon, family. I'm still working, so I can't come to you directly, but I couldn't miss this window to tune in to the closing arguments by the prosecution and defense in the Kyle, what I affectionately call him, RittenKKRACKER trial. And why is this important, family? Because if this Mickey Ficky walks, if he is acquitted, this is going to be yet another state-sanctioned deputized execution of freedmen. You heard it here first. He cannot walk. So what you're going to see right now is defense going up first to give the closing argument. But from the little bit I heard from the prosecution, they shot this whole case out the water. If the jury has a fair bone in their body, this boy should go away for several lifetimes. The prosecution did its thing in the closing. They fumbled during the regular course of the trial from the little outtakes that I saw, But this should seal the deal. If the jury isn't as racist as the judge and clearly Kyle RittenKKRACKER. So let me get this going for you right away. I'll be back. I'm at court, so I'm in between. So bear with me. Stand by. Sharing screen now.
May it please the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good afternoon. Showing you a snippet, State's Exhibit 18, which Mr. Binger just spent 3 or 4 minutes showing that Mr. Rosenbaum wasn't around. My client couldn't know that he wraps his head in orange. Chain, bag, orange. Ladies and gentlemen, we had this video almost as long as they've had this video. But Mr. Binger will use this video to lie to your faces and tell you that Kyle Rittenhouse was taking advantage of the situation.
I object, Your Honor.
It's in the picture.
It's argument.
Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not a game. It is my client's life. We don't play fast and loose with the facts, pretending that Mr. Rosenbaum was Citizen A #1 guy. He was a bad man. He was there. He was causing trouble. He was a rioter. And my client had to deal with him that night alone. When I say that the truth matters and this is not a game, what do I mean by that? Mr. Binger is the one who put on the Kandiri brothers. The reason he put them on, in spite of what he might say today, is because he wanted you, now 18, soon to be 12 people, to say, gosh, that kid just went to that place and just protected it. He wasn't asked. He was asked. Mr. Kandiri's asked Nick. Nick got a group of people to go down there. The people from West Bend came. Provocation, another thing. Think back on November 2nd, when this case started. Did you hear one word out of Mr. Binger's mouth about provocation? You didn't, because it was never said. But when his case explodes in his face, now he comes out with provocation. That was opening. And most importantly, in opening, quoting from Mr. Binger's first paragraph of his opening statement on November 2nd, 2021. This occurred after the defendant chased down Mr. Rosenbaum and confronted him while yielding an AR-14. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the videos. Mr. Rosenbaum sees, and I'll show you the video in my closing argument. You'll see Mr. Rosenbaum take off when he sees my client coming along with the Zeminskis to set up the ambush of my client. Provocation? I don't think so. The things that I've just pointed out to you, why is that a problem? Because 1, he's lying. 2, he's misrepresenting. Or he wasn't prepared when he started this trial, and his closing argument has been a change to try and fit what has come up. Remember how when he was talking, there's no proof that the Rosenbaum and Zeminski knew each other? Maybe they didn't know each other that night, but they were together throughout the night. You see them together in pictures, wreaking havoc in this city. And now we have the magic pixel camera that brings forth his provocation. I'm going to go through the charges, and we'll talk about each one of them. Then I'll go through the witnesses, and hopefully I'll bring it home in an honest and forthright fashion. Count 1, reckless homicide. My client shot Joseph Rosenbaum. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, there was nothing reckless about about my client's conduct that day in regards to Mr. Rosenbaum. Mr. Rosenbaum was coming at him. My client ran from him, retreated, which is not needed, continues to run. The plastic bag is thrown, the metallic plastic bag. Kyle doesn't know what it is at that time. It causes him to turn and look over his shoulder, pointing the gun in that direction. Mr. Rosenbaum, is he dissuaded by that? No, he is not. He continues running and advancing on my client. That whole time, the state doesn't say anything about Mr. Zeminski firing a shot, Mr. Zeminski having his gun up. Think of the circumstances as they existed at 11:50 on August 25th of 2020. He runs through that parking lot. He continues running on. He turns as he comes into that box canyon with the cars, the van, and I believe it's a Pepsi machine. And he turns because he has no place else to go. I'll show you the Zanin video later on. What's important about the Zanin video, you see that mob of people destroying the cars at Car Source 3, which Mr. Binger doesn't want my client to go and try to protect, even though he was asked by those individuals to protect that property. Nick Smith called him, hey, they're bashing up the cars and starting fires. Go down there. He goes down there. He has as much right to go there as anybody else in the city of Kenosha and be unmolested by the likes of Joseph Rosenbaum, Kelly, and Joshua Zeminski. And Mr. Binger says, oh, we'll get the Zeminskis later. Well, ladies and gentlemen, last time I checked, this is still the United States of America, and he has the burden of proof. If he wants you guys to believe that my client pointed a gun at him, call the Zeminskis, put him on the witness stand, ask him questions, and let me or Mr. Sharafi cross-examine him. That's how we do things in a court of law, but not in Mr. Binger's court. He says, I'm blaming the victim. As a defense lawyer, I might get accused of that more than some other people. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rosenbaum was shot because he was chasing my client and going to kill him, take his gun, and carry out the threats he made. And Mr. Binger wants to make a big hullabaloo about the shot in the back. Remember his opening statement? He shot him in the back. And that's why I'm sitting here in front of the jury like this. Did he shoot him here? Did he shoot him there? Because of the way the bullet went in and where the bullet ended up in the hip, you know full well that the individual, and I asked the doctor, is on a horizontal plane. What is that horizontal plane consistent of? Somebody leaping, lunging at my client. And we know how close Mr. Rosenbaum was to my client. The furthest he could have been when it started, the first shot, 4 feet with the stipler. We know that his hand was on the gun. Mr. Binger wants you to believe that that was just happenstance and accident. Come on, people. Physical evidence does not lie. Use your common sense and good judgment. He talks about Mr. Rosenbaum just somehow ending up down at the riots. Remember that? Mr. Rosenbaum, according to the testimony, walked from the bus center 4 miles out to Ms. Swartz's house, and then he couldn't stay there for some reason, and 4 miles all the way back. That's not just ending up. That's going someplace with a purpose, and throughout the night, you saw his purpose. And there was more than one piece of testimony about Mr. Rosenbaum, whether it was a hospital or whether or not it was a jail. Remember that? And there was testimony regarding his medication. Ms. Swartz said we couldn't get medication because the Walgreens were all boarded up. She said The hospital said they gave him his medication. So whatever facility gave him his medication. Mr. Binger, the man with the burden of proof, why didn't he bring in a hospital or a jail to prove that Mr. Rosenbaum was properly medicated? He'd been off his medications, according to Ms. Swart, for 7 to 10 days. We know that he was acting like somebody who wasn't on their proper medication. He was not acting normal. Next. Richard McGinnis. Reckless. And here, Mr. McGinnis, I'd like to talk about, because the self-defense does not go to Mr. McGinnis, but if Kyle was privileged in exercising self-defense against Mr. Rosenbaum, it carries over to the endangering count of Mr. McGinnis. And Mr. McGinnis, specifically, if the defendant, and I'm reading directly from an instruction, page 9, second full paragraph, which you will be given, if the defendant was acting lawfully in self-defense, his conduct did not create an unreasonable risk to another. That is Mr. McGinnis. Ladies and gentlemen, when my client shot Joseph Rosenbaum, he feared for his life. He feared because of the prior threats, the prior statements, and the violent acts that had been witnessed by my client. Mr. McGinnis, as a witness, I think he helped us more than he hurt us. He talked about, and this was on cross for Mr. Binger, how do you know what Mr. Rosenbaum was thinking? Because I don't, but I know he yelled, "Fuck you," and then lunged at Kyle Rittenhouse. Why is he yelling the F you? One of two things. One, to intimidate, or two, he got into a situation over his head, thinking, as he said before chasing him, "You won't do shit, MFer," to my client. Well, he was wrong. He states Kyle did not know that he was there, meaning Richard McGinnis. He's a citizen journalist who was running along with his hand and his phone in his hand up in the air to get a story. My client is not responsible for endangering him when he runs into danger. Plus, the instruction says that if he was privileged as for Rosenbaum, he's privileged as to count 2, Mr. McGinnis. Count 3. Jump kick man. The uncomplaining, unidentified witness in count 3. There'll be some video later on when I'm going through some of that. You'll see, and I ask you to pay attention. The state has said he's not kicking him. He doesn't hit him. When you watch the video, and it'll be in slow motion, watch where his foot goes, watch what happens to Kyle's head. The force of him kicking him in the face spins his body 180 degrees around. And then it's on. Huber coming in from behind, hitting him in the neck with the skateboard. Ladies and gentlemen, what you see throughout event number 2, and this is the beginning of it, is individuals working in a mob. They don't know what happened at Car Source 3, event number 1. But somebody said, hey, he shot somebody. Doesn't know that he was being chased by a crazy person. But they're going to get their licks in on Kyle Rittenhouse, or as they perceive him, somebody from the other side who has been putting out their fires, causing problems for them, stopping them from wreaking havoc in Kenosha like they did the night before. And ladies and gentlemen, the standard is likely to cause death or great bodily harm. Great bodily harm is defined as likely to cause serious bodily injury. A kick to the head is likely to cause a serious injury. Did my client suffer a debilitating injury as a result of that? No, but that's not the standard. Mr. Huber, he's a rioter, pushing a dumpster lit on fire, going to the barricades to pick up pepper balls, throw them back, pointing his middle finger at the police. He's assisting Rosenbaum at the gas station, hits Rittenhouse 2 times with the skateboard, and attempts to disarm him. You'll see it all in the slow motion video later on. And Kyle Rittenhouse is running away from Anthony Huber. The state wants to call my client an active shooter. And the reason they want to do that is because of the loaded connotations of that word. Everyone has heard of the theater killings, the school shootings, and things like that. Ask yourself, the definition of an active shooter is somebody with a plan to inflict multiple casualties, usually out of anger or animus towards a group. This case, what caused Kyle Rittenhouse to shoot somebody? Joseph Rosenbaum. He runs after shooting Joseph Rosenbaum for almost 2 blocks before scene number 2. Mr. Binger makes a big thing about Kyle Rittenhouse not staying around Car Source 3 after the shooting. Ladies and gentlemen, if Kyle Rittenhouse had stayed at Car Source 3, all that would have happened is it would have made the police have an easier job, because scene 1 and scene 2 would have been put in the same location. My client ran 2 blocks without shooting at anyone, pointing at anyone, doing anything to try and get away. He tells the individuals he's going to the police, and he's running in that direction when he's stopped. He's hit in the head with a hand with a rock in it, knocking his hat off. Mr. Binger says, oh, he just knocked his hat off. I don't think that individual was trying to steal Mr. Rittenhouse's hat. He was trying to take his hat off. Who comes in next? Anthony Huber for the first time. Hits him. Opening statement, Mr. Binger, was he takes a swing at him. Now it's he blocked, because we took the videotape and lightened it up. Huber strikes him in the head and arm the first time. Jump kick man comes in, kicks him in the face, spins his body 180 degrees, and Anthony Huber comes in for the second lick to the shoulder neck area, trying to take his head off. And when he does that, his other hand goes grabbing for the gun, his bare hand onto the gun and pulling it away from Kyle Rittenhouse. Mr. Binger wants Kyle to sit there and hope and pray to God his strap works, and Anthony Huber can't get the gun. We don't know that. We'll never know that, as he's running away from him. A shot as the gun is being separated from his body, and you'll see the butt way far away when the shot is finally fired. Even Gage Groswitz said he was concerned about the blows that Jump Kick Man and Anthony Huber were inflicting on Kyle's head. That's probably the only thing I agree with Mr. Groswitz. Gage Groswitz. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what Kyle did under those facts and circumstances was unreasonable, that he was not entitled to self-defense. Consider all the events that had occurred that evening. Him being attacked, kicked in the head, hit in the head with a skateboard, other individuals running up on him, and now Mr. Groswitz runs up on him. And the first action of Mr. Groskowitz, and I'll go through the video later, is really he's running in, the hand is coming up, and the gunshot with Huber goes off. And the natural reaction is the flinch. He covers up. And then he pulls his hands up. And as he's standing with his hands up, look, he's not gripping the gun anymore in a pistol grip. Hands apart, hands up. And as he comes in to finish the job, the hand is on the gun going for Mr. Rittenhouse. And he says it's an involuntary movement. The shot comes before it gets directly to his head, but the motion is coming, the shot, and it continues on with that momentum. Enough momentum to go through the bullet and point directly at Kyle's head. Does Kyle fire again? No, he doesn't. Actions likely to cause death or great bodily harm. And he is coming in with a loaded Glock. And we asked Mr. Gage Groskowitz about it. He wouldn't even admit that there was one in the chamber. That's why we had to put on the officer to talk about the unfired shell casing. Bukowski talked about clearing the weapon and a live round coming out. Because Groskowitz won't say anything that puts him in a bad light. Groskowitz, the person who has 10 million reasons to lie. And we all know he did lie. Because he never gave a new interview after giving his statement saying he dropped his gun going down the street. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the charges. Those are a synopsis of the charges. As I stated, the burden is on the state, and they must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that my client did not have the right to self-defense. Kyle, as he sits here, is presumed innocent of all charges. If there is any reasonable hypothesis to reconcile with Kyle's innocence, that is what you are to choose. Remember, when looking at the burden of proof, they have it. Think about some of the things, the shoddy investigation, the rush to judgment from the Kenosha District Attorney's Office, the Zeminskis not being called as witnesses. They have the burden of proof. We don't. They want it to be that Kyle was out there doing something improper. Kyle was a 17-year-old kid out there trying to help this community. He was asked to provide help in protecting property at the car sources. It started, and he did it. He did provide aid, and he was asking if anybody needed aid. Whether somebody chooses to accept that aid, that's on them. But Mr. Binger wants to poo-poo his sincere belief that he's helping people, and because he borrowed bandages from Dominic Black, and I think he might have borrowed something from Bukowski also. But in the picture, when the canary poses with all the people who are going to protect his property, there's Kyle's big orange gator box. He's got his pack on, filled with things, and he's willing to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle was not an active shooter. That is a buzzword that the state wants to lash onto because it excuses the actions of that mob on the 25th of 2020. Whenever Kyle was there, he reacted to people attacking him. There's numerous times, and you'll see him on the video, he does not shoot. He runs 2 blocks from 63rd to 61st Scene 2 without firing his weapon. Individual hits him in the back of the head. He does not turn around to address that threat. Huber takes a swing at him with the skateboard like that. Kyle blocks, and the skateboard's knocked out of his hand. He doesn't turn around and shoot him. He keeps running and falls from the 2 hits. He's run that far, and yet somehow he just fell over on his own. As soon as he's on the ground, they're there attacking him. And you see the people the law of self-defense. You've seen it, you've heard it. Now I'm going to go through the witnesses. Oh, Dominic Black, first witness, charged by Mr. Binger for providing the gun to my client. 2 counts, looking at up to 6 years in prison. His case has been adjourned so that he can help the state. I don't think he helped the state that much. I think he was a pretty truthful witness, all in all. He told them about Kyle there to help people, that they had permission from the Kandiris, that he saw Kyle help the woman with the foot, help the person with the hand. Mr. Binger wants to just say, oh, that doesn't matter. If it wasn't Kyle, it would have been somebody else. The point is, he was there and he did it. There was no pointing by Kyle of any laser sight. There was no ability for Kyle or him to point laser sights at anyone because their guns didn't have the type of optics that did that. He said Kyle was there to help. The only person helping was Kyle. And he can say what he wants about whether or not he let Kyle take the gun or not take the gun. He never told him not to. He went to the location with him. They bought straps at Jelensky's together. He's trying to cover his butt a little bit. The guns were there and they took them. They took the guns, as he said, to deter people attacking them. He saw Kyle at the end, sweating, was in shock, and said that he shot someone, he had to do it. That is Dominic Black. Corey Washington saw the rioters breaking up concrete at the church parking lot, described Rosenbaum as erratic, stated the crowd was suspicious. I don't know what that means. One of the things that I thought was strange was the night before they were burning garbage trucks, but they only burnt the old ones. I think that tells you something about his point of view, that there's a certain amount of property damage that is justified and okay. Kenosha was using those garbage trucks that the rioters lit on fire. And nothing regarding property destruction was going to do anything to help Jacob Blake. We also learned that Kyle Rittenhouse smokes cigarettes and that he has an affinity for the Dinosaur Museum. Detective Howard, ladies and gentlemen, Detective Howard's testimony and Detective Antaramian's testimony is the stuff of what reasonable doubt is made of. 2 detectives, both lead officers on this case. They've sat through every minute of this trial, and their opinions of the actions of Mr. Rosenbaum from testimony, videos, couldn't be more diametrically opposed. Detective Howard, on cross-examination, knew that the guy was hiding in the car and jumped out from behind the car and began chasing Kyle Rittenhouse. Oh boy, that's not good for the state's case. So there's the old chit-chat between Mr. Howard and Mr. Antaramian and the prosecutors after, and all of a sudden we've come up with the new theory. And you heard the new theory that he raised the gun and that's what's on the video. Could I have the firearm, please? Told me check it. He told me check it.
When? After lunch? Before lunch. Check it again.
think about when Kyle Rittenhouse is firing the gun, when he's seen holding the gun throughout the events of the 25th. Shouldering the gun, I'm not going to bring it all the way up to my shoulder, to the right shoulder, which would be a stance like this. The reason I objected in his closing argument is because that's not the way he was standing. If he's standing like this is right-handed, pointing the gun this way, up at the ready, his back would be to the drone footage. In the drone footage, you see the arm. It would be somebody having to hold the gun left-handed. This is a right-handed firearm. If this gun is brought up to his face and it is pulled back, the shell casing, hot, and the fire that ejects it is going to be going right into Kyle's face. The photograph I'll talk about later. You don't see the straps on his shirt. It didn't happen the way he said. It doesn't happen the way in the photograph. I'm going to need this again. Burden of proof, once again. The telephones, the searching of telephones with search warrants, the subpoenaing of records. I have no problem with that. It's good police work. But when you pick and choose and you make favorites, it's not. My client testified, and I'll say it this way, the detective testified that my client's phone was sent to the FBI. It was unsearchable because of the operating system. The FBI and the federal government had not cracked it yet. We found out about that. We had nothing to hide. Here's the numbers. Search the phone as long as we're given a simultaneous copy. So we have what you have. We can have our experts look at it. They can have their experts look at it. So we know that there isn't anything added or deleted. We did that. We gave that to the state. If we had something to hide, they never would have gotten in that phone. They took the phone, they made a copy, they searched it. Lo and behold, nothing of an incriminating nature in it, nothing militia, white supremacist, any of that. Gage Groskowitz, different story. They had a valid search warrant for it. The only search warrant that these guys have never not executed when it's sitting right in front of them. Not just that, but Mr. Groskowitz could have consented to them going in the phone. If he has nothing to hide, why not? Why not let them look in the phone? And let's take common sense and judgment one step further. Police officers get search warrants. They execute the search warrant. Sometimes somebody feels as though their rights have been violated, and it gets litigated in a court of law. If it was illegal, the information in that search warrant never comes out in court. If it's legal, after a judge has said there were no rights violated, it comes in evidence. What was Mr. Groskowitz afraid of? Why wouldn't the state execute the search warrant, let Mr. Groskowitz and his attorney object, file a motion and say, you can't go in my phone? Let the judge decide, not the person who's prosecuting and protecting Mr. Groskowitz. Come on, people. Mr. Groskowitz has 10 million reasons for not wanting somebody to go in his phone. The timing with the detectives and some of their actions, I think, are very important. They get down to Antioch at about 3:30 in the morning of the 26th, less than 4 hours after this happens. By 6 o'clock, 6:30, given the benefit of the doubt, Kyle Rittenhouse is under arrest for first-degree murder. There's not been any autopsy done. There haven't been any witness statements taken. They've got 2 or 3 videos. The bullets, I should say it this way, all of the bullets have not even been picked up from car source at this point. But they're willing to make a decision. And were they under pressure? I'm sure they were. They're afraid that there's going to be another night of looting, destruction in Kenosha because of this happening and the way the word got out. He traveled across state lines. He was here. He brought his AR with him. The AR was here. He was a white supremacist looking for trouble. Nothing. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, when we picked you guys as jurors, we asked you if you could decide based upon the evidence that happens in the courtroom. Not what you'd heard before, not all of the lies and untruths that have been put out in the media. I heard one guy say, my client discharged the gun 60 times. Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening in court is what you decide the truth on. He was charged on the 27th. Still, they didn't have the information, the autopsy's final, anything like that. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a rush to judgment. Richie McGinnis, I talked about earlier, citizen journalists. Mr. Binger talked about him seeing guns. But remember the cross of Mr. McGinnis. Guns are not legal in Portland, Washington, or DC or New York. They're not allowed on the streets. You can be arrested. There are state laws. And ladies and gentlemen, the gun in this case is no longer an issue. Whether or not it was a dangerous weapon as it applies to the charges is, but my client is no longer charged with minor in possession of a firearm. But he needs his AR-15 and the assault weapon and the fear that goes with that to try and bring home an unjust guilty verdict. Ryan Balch had never met Kyle Rittenhouse before the evening hours of the 25th, has never spoken to him or known him after. And yet the state wants you to believe he made up something about a threat to kill. Why? What's in it for him? The threat. If I get either of you alone, I will kill you. That is a threat with a statement and a promise. And lo and behold, the chance presented itself to Mr. Rosenbaum, and he attempted to execute it. And I don't for a minute believe that he would have done it if it was Mr. Balch, who's much bigger than my client, muscular, well-built, and much more assertive and forceful. Rosenbaum, like any, as he referred to him, I don't even know what he called him, a rag doll, whatever, but the little guy who gets beat up likes to go after the next littlest guy. He saw Kyle alone, and that's what he chose to. Or he could have been mistaken and thinking it was the other person at the ultimate that he went after and had to be held back. They were dressed very similarly, baseball caps, mask, and the only difference was the difference between shorts and long pants. I can't answer that. Mr. Rosenbaum at this point, I guess, can't either. But you see Mr. Rosenbaum right around the time in question at that location, menacing with his chain. I skipped. That's Mr. Balch. I talked about him going on. There's Amber Rasmussen. She was the DNA expert. What I say to you is DNA is an incredibly useful tool. but DNA is only as useful as what you put into it. And if DNA shows anything, it shows that it's not proof positive in this case. We know in hearing from Dr. Kelly that he most probably touched the gun. It was a contact wound is the way he described it. And we know through the videos, Huber touched the gun with his bare hand, and yet no DNA was found on that gun. So don't let your eyes deceive you. Don't let the physical evidence be discounted because of what she said. The end of that barrel was not swabbed. And we know he had to be at the end of the barrel, or it would have had the soot on all of the fingers. Jason Lukowski thought was an interesting witness. He was the Marine who put the phrase, shout, shove, show, shoot. And I asked him about that, and I don't for a minute disbelieve that that's the Marines' rule. Is there any retreat in there? He said, no. He looked at me like I was stupid. The reason he looked like that was because they don't retreat. Yet Kyle Rittenhouse did retreat. He tried getting away from Mr. Rosenbaum. He described Joseph Rosenbaum as belligerent, with malintent, used the N-word, did the false step thing, did not see Kyle as aggressive. He was there for a shorter period of time than anyone else at Car Source. He also cleared Gage Grosquist's gun after the shooting and made it safe, took the shell out of it. And I ask you to think back to the direct examination of Mr. Lukowski by the state. When they asked him, what did Kyle say to you? His first statement was, I just shot somebody, I need help. That's what he testified to. And then Mr. Binger shows him the statement and gets him to say, well, I told the FBI that. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what he told the FBI. The FBI.
Okay, family, I'm not sure what just happened. It seemed like that one stopped. Let's pick up another one so we can finish hearing the closing arguments. That's just the defense right there. Let me stop the screen and find another one where they're so we can get defense. I'm sorry, the prosecution. This is defense right now pleading his case. For some reason, it ended there. I don't necessarily get why, because there's still more to go. Let's see if I play it. Just a second,
You've been
family.
watching the murder trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. This is closing arguments day, and it's taken all day.
Pedophile on national television.
Okay, hold on, family. Just a second.
But you do get into conversations then with how many people came out talking about George Floyd. Like, what
fall and prey to is everything
About provocation. You didn't, because it was never said. But when his case explodes in his face, now he comes out with provocation. One, he's lying.
Okay, so this is them doing an overview. Just a second, family.
Or
I want
he
to
wasn't
find.
prepared when he started this trial, and his closing argument has been a change to try and fit what has come out.
Katie. So the defense has been able to go back to the
This is
evidence
Fox
of the jury
News
to
actually
show them,
going
to let them-
over it. I just want you guys to hear and make an informed decision what your thoughts are about it. So just a second. Okay, stand by. Let's see what this one is doing.
Life from Mr. Rosenbaum. I'm sorry.
I want to just fast forward real quick to ensure defense is in here. I mean, the prosecution. I keep confusing the two. There we go. So I'm just going to pick up the tape. You guys hear the white splaining.
Which is that I don't think it's an evidence.
Okay. So you hear the white splaining here. You hear them trying to they're trying to make the victims the problem. And you guys know that we know how this works all too well as freedmen in this country. We know how our unarmed Black men, women, and children are always put on trial when it comes to these white supremacists taking us out, whether they are race soldiers, as in on the payroll, as in the cops with 3Ks, or whether they are civilians who have the right to execute us because they're pretty much being deputized to actually fire on us. And let me, before I share my comments, let's finish hearing this out because I don't want to get ahead of myself. Hold on, let me share the screen. Stand by.
Ms. Zeminski was charged and convicted.
Trying to get rid of all this pausing stuff, but I don't want to cut off what the judge is saying. He's very racist too.
I think he said that Zeminskis are charged by my
Uh-oh.
office.
You'll see the butt of the
I
gun
went too far.
separate regarding changing brightness and contrast right in front of you. And the one video went from a dark mess of nothing, move the two lines. I don't know how to do it, but he did right in front of you, hit it, and all of a sudden it's light and you can see it. The whole event that evening took 2 minutes and 55 seconds from the 3 times friendly to the time he surrendered or attempted to surrender at law enforcement. Officer Brittany Bray, let me go through the back up to the first one. Total time, 2 minutes, 55 seconds, according to Dr. Black. Next, friendly, 4 shots, 10.8 seconds. Those are the shot times. Remember the sound he put and synced up with the video? That was the audio graph, the green thing he showed you. You can see when the shot is fired, he matches it up, times them out by the frames per second. You come up with those numbers. And that's because when you show something in slow motion, it looks like somebody can really have the time to think, process, and do all that. You have to remember how fast all this was happening in event number 1. He's running, but the district attorney's office is marching forward with this case because they need somebody to be responsible.
Okay.
They need somebody.
Up next is the prosecution.
And say,
this guy is a bag of hot air. He's just basically trying to justify
Kyle Rittenhouse is not
this
that
young
individual.
KKK
The rioters,
coming
demonstrators
over
who turned
to
into
Wisconsin
rioters,
to
those are the individuals
murder,
who bring us forth.
Execute.
And I ask you to remember, and I'll show you the videos for the last time from me.
Okay, so
the
this
anger
is
and the
him
mob
ending.
that was going on that night. They were not going to be dissuaded from doing things. They were pushing, firing dumpsters, destroying property. And that was, so you're saying Mr. Rittenhouse put out a fire? Yes, it was a small fire. Last time I checked, small fires turn into big fires. So, kind of stupid. James Armstrong, Hocus pocus, out of focus. I talked about him. He spent 20 hours reworking a frame in a video and averaging, having my client somehow miraculously go from a right-handed shooter to a left-handed shooter. The mirror on the truck is the arm. Their whole case relies on that one photograph that he spent 20 hours on. That's how they're going to prove provocation, a word you never heard in the opening statement. It was my client chased him down and shot him in the back. Oops, can't prove that. This is the day before, car source burning, car source 1 burning the ground. What's in the foreground? The trailer should be the subject. Pictures later on. There's Kyle earlier in the day on the 25th, setting up his alibi, setting up his I'm a good person story, because he thinks he's going to go out and kill 3 people that night. Ladies and gentlemen, that is garbage. How would he know he's going to be photographed? And what does that do? It just shows he's interested in his community, trying to do good. Picture, Mr. Kandiri at car source 3. The state doesn't want Kyle to go to car source 3. According to the state, he has to stay at car source 2, 59th and Sheridan. Yet, Nick Smith called and asked him to go there because whoever was going to protect that property had left.
On objection, Your Honor, the record does not indicate that Nick Smith made that phone call.
It's argument that folks, you heard the evidence and use your collective recollections to determine what the truth of it is and discount anything that is not supported in the evidence.
Testimony was he received a phone call saying they were destroying cars at car source 3, and he went down there. First, Kyle asked for a fire extinguisher, asked the other individual to go down there with him, said, didn't give an answer, and Kyle took off going down there to try and help protect that property. This is that night, tear gas.
I'll just let it play, family. I thought he was done, for God's sake.
It's Mr. Rosenbaum pushing one of many dumpster fires.
You're right, Atlantic Creole Department of Education. It's
Right
frightening.
there. That's one.
If this boy doesn't get life, woe unto us.
Bats, guns, Mr. Rosenbaum pushing it in. Either the gas station or threw it in. Police get right down here. They're trying to push it to it. I apologize. They're trying to push the dumpster down to the line of police or to the gas station.
You guys get your guns.
It's put out, and the reaction from Mr. Rosenbaum of dumpster number 2. You hear the voice? Why you do that? There's Mr. Rosenbaum arguing. Mr. Zeminski, the smiling puppeteer standing behind him. Yeah, they didn't know each other. Maybe they didn't, but they sure spent a lot of time together that night. Mr. Zeminski with the yellow circle, holding his firearm, yellow pants, Kelly Zeminski with a flashlight in her hand. Last time I checked, there wasn't any lighting problems. The flashlight is a weapon to bash heads if you have to. Many people with AR-15s, not one person with an AR-15. That's the difference between this, the Ultimate Gas Station, Fracas, and what happened down at Car Source 3. Kyle Rittenhouse was alone. He had been taken away from the herd, and Mr. Rosenbaum and Mr. Zeminski were going to get him. movement. Mr. Rosenbaum in his bag. He's not dissuaded by the people. He's going right at them. He's not afraid of them. He's pushing in and going at them. He's not afraid of a gun. Yelling. Shoot me N-word, shoot me N-word. Mr. Zeminski pulling his gun down to his side, remembering this is Black Lives Matter rally, and he's there to support their cause. Yeah, great. Mr. Huber, right there, holding him back, actually physically holding him back, right in the middle of it. Look at the anger in his face. This here, I'll start it, but I'm going to point it out first. Saw a video earlier, this individual starting to dramatize on fire. Right here, jumped it now. You see him shoot in the lighter fluid or flammable liquid. You see John Pickman being right involved. This is a calm Tuesday evening that Mr. Binger is alluding to. Mr. Rosenbaum, this time wearing a blue mask, tipping over the porta potty. It was just a little porta potty. The trailer is important because it's waiting arms itself with the chain. Here's Rosenbaum pushing it. He's just a regular demonstrator or misunderstood, a little bit upset. What does he need a chain for? What does he need a bag? Why didn't he leave it with his sword? Here, three things. Blue circle, his bag, backed up by the fire. Look at that bag. Does that look like there's nothing in it? Look at this. What is it? That's not a water bottle, ladies and gentlemen. I can't tell you what it is, but it's not a water bottle. Look at this. You need a chain on each side. He's got it. Hanging a shirt right here. The toe chain. Jump kick man. Right there, the mask, white jeans, black. Look at the boots. Those boots will soon be impacted by client's face. Rundown live. Here, once again, Rosenbaum, Minsky at the trailer after it's been taken down the street, set up on its side, and started on fire. You can still see one of the chains hanging from the tongue of the trailer. Rundown live. The state showed this video. I started my opening statement with it. I was going to show you where Mr. Rosenbaum is. I've already done it. Don't need to waste your time. Right at the end. Here's the picture that we showed at the beginning. Right there, the 125-26. Mr. Rosenbaum masked with his chain during the Rundown Live video. Mr. Rosenbaum with the chain. As I said earlier, look at how Kyle's dressed. Look at the pack on his left side, left hip. The crosses going across the front and the back of his chest. Nowhere in the magic picture is that depicted. 11:40, he's crossed over that line, asking people if they want medical, runs into Yellow Pants. He walks away from confrontation. And Yellow Pants said, "You pointed your gun at me," and he goes like this, low red. The individuals who were there with him, slingshot, rocks in the hand, gun. Mr. McGinnis. Kyle, after having the brief thing with Yellow Pants, he goes away from them, goes over, looks for Mr. Balch. They might have been close to one another, but they did not find one another. He tries to go back. Wants to get back to car source 2. After that, he goes back and waits. He gets the phone call. He testified about the phone call, either from Nick or Dominic. And what does he do? He gets a fire extinguisher. He hasn't had a fire extinguisher all night, but he gets a fire extinguisher. The circumstantial evidence shows the call came through. He testified the call came through. You know, if it wasn't in his phone, the state would have brought it up. But now they're playing games once again. This is Drew Hernandez's video. It starts in color and goes, starts in black and white and goes to color. You have Jump Kick Man, the Zeminskis. You'll hear Kelly Zeminski talking. And during the first part of the trial, we saw this trailer go by, and it cut off the view from this location. And I'll stop it a few times. Did you hear that? Talking about a pepper ball exploding in her ass. That's Kelly Zeminski speaking. It's blurry. Keep your eye here and here. I'll love you. That's Kyle right there to the right of the garbage can by that splurge of light. Mr. Rosenbaum, as soon as Kyle is coming, gets up and starts walking away. Kelly Zeminski, this individual, Jump Kick Man was there earlier. Up there. That's Kyle with the fire extinguisher walking. Doesn't say anything to any of them. They see him coming. They head down to do their ambush. He's not chasing them. He's not running after them. He's walking down to put out the fire. Let's start it over again. You hear Kyle yell, "Friendly, friendly, friendly." That is the start of Mr. Rosenbaum chasing Kyle. Now they come in. He's thrown. It goes to the small. He's thrown the bag.
Thermax just got. That Thermax got fucking beat up.
this area before he's chased. It's been shown on the drone video. It's shown on the FBI video. Sminskys are standing right here, and that's when the chase is on.
Yo.
You can hear the destruction of the vehicles as he approaches. Gun, gun, gun. And he's off and running. We've seen the videos. Here is the Zanin video, parts of it. As I said, watch for the first shot. Look at all those people standing there. A wall of people destroying cars. The state wants Kyle to run into that wall of people. Listen for the first shot and watch the lackadaisical attitude, and then hear the 4 shots in quick succession and watch what happens.
Oh shit. They shooting. Oh shit. Oh my God.
Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. The first shot happens, they barely begin to move. Between the first shot and Kyle's first shot, which is the second shot you hear, Kyle has turned around. Why is he turned around? Because that wall of people is there and he has nowhere else to run. The cars, the van, all of the people destroying property, the soda machine, he turns around. And Mr. Rosenbaum keeps coming. Mr. Rosenbaum keeps coming. He lunges, gunshots. There's Mr. Zaminsky with his gun down there at his side as his wife yells, effing get him, he just shot somebody, which they started.
He fucking shot him! Get him back!
Pointing the gun, once again, his right hand.
He fucking shot him! He fucking shot him!
Take screenshots. Shot him.
Gage Grosskitz's cell phone video. Does Kyle ever point the firearm at Gage Grosskitz when he runs up on him unarmed?
Hey, what are you doing? You shot somebody?
I'm going to get the police. He's going towards the police. He's continuing on. He's past Gage Grosskitz. He hasn't shot Gage Grosskitz. He hasn't pointed the firearm at Gage Grosskitz. The medic, if he thinks someone shot, why isn't he there? He doesn't know Richie McGinnis is tending to him. None of the people who chase him are at Car Source 3. There is no evidence. Zaminsky doesn't chase him. Zaminsky doesn't want anything to do with it. His wife doesn't want anything to do with it. But the mob is now formed and is chasing him down Sheridan Road in a northerly direction.
Who shot? Who shot?
He turns all the way around, looking towards Car Source 3. Could go there. At this point, he hasn't armed himself. Kyle is zero threat to anyone. This active shooter BS is something that Mr. Binger is trying to sell you people. Has he shot anybody since Car Source 3? No, he hasn't. He's running to try and get to the police. Mr. Binger must live in fairy tale land to think that Kyle could stop, put his gun down, and say, hey, everything's good, leave me alone, I'm going to the police. Unfortunately, that's not how the real world works. This was real world. People yelling to stop him. Next picture, you saw it in opening statements. Mr. Grosswitz chasing down Kyle Rittenhouse. Kept his gun in the small of his back. He's arming himself right here. Look how far Kyle Rittenhouse is ahead of him. No threat. He's run 2 blocks, almost 3 because it's at the far end of 63rd. He hasn't shot his gun since. If he's an active shooter looking to take as many people as possible, he's laying waste to everybody as he's running. Remember, he's got 30 bullets. He shot 8 times, 4 in scene 1 and 4 coming up. He's not indiscriminately shooting, pointing, doing anything. Here's full speed. Pointing the gun at anyone? No. Running down the street, trying to get to those lights where the Bearcats are and law enforcement. He's not running off to the side to hide in the shadows. Blow to the head first, knocking his hat off. What has Kyle Rittenhouse done? Nothing. Trying to get away from the mob. First strike from the mob. He's not an active shooter. He's gone 2 blocks, hasn't shot anybody. Coming in behind with a skateboard at the ready, Anthony Huber. That will be strike number 1. Remember in opening statements when Mr. Binger said, oh, something happened to his skateboard. He took a swing at him. Kyle blocked it with his arm in the enhanced photos. What does Mr. Huber do? He runs, grabs the skateboard, and comes in for more. It's on the ground. Most vulnerable position you can be in. What do we have? We have Anthony Huber here, already picking up his skateboard. With this guy with the towel wrapped around his head, coming in at Kyle. Jump kick, man. Guy who's hit him in the head. If you go forward just a little bit, see if it works this far. Nope. You saw this individual over here who's now instructed come in at Kyle. Kyle points his firearm at him. He backs up. Kyle does not shoot. Jump kick man is leading with this foot. This foot is still on the ground. What direction is Kyle pointing right now? Watch what happens after jump kick man kicks him in the face. He's turned around. He's looking in that direction. Anthony Huber coming in with the skateboard. Watch what Anthony Huber does with the skateboard. Blow to the head. Coming in. Kyle's trying to get up. Anthony Huber's hand goes onto the gun. This is the fast one. The gun is pulled away from Kyle. Anthony Huber fires. When Anthony Huber fires, Gage Grosswitz flinches, covers up. Natural, uncontrollable reaction. here's the slow motion. He's been hit in the head. The cap is off. Anthony Huber winds up with the full force of his body. Back here, he swings the skateboard at Kyle. Kyle senses it coming. He turns around and looks, blocks it with his arm. Doesn't turn around and shoot Anthony Huber as he's being attacked with what is a deadly weapon. A skateboard can cause death or great bodily harm, ladies and gentlemen. He doesn't do it. He continues to run a couple of steps before the blow to the head, and this is knocked into the ground. He immediately changes direction, goes running for the skateboard. I want to get through this one. Okay. Now this is slow motion. Just as he's on the ground, he's set up, trying to get up. The individual to Kyle's left is the one who runs in. Kyle points the firearm. He backs off. He is not shot at. Backs up. He's now addressing the second nearest threat. Does not shoot. That individual right there in that picture is stopping. Jump kit man launches, contact, fire, turned around. In comes Anthony Huber. Blow to the head and neck. Now, when I started, you'll see Anthony Huber pull on his gun. And you'll see the butt of the gun separate from Kyle's body going in that direction, away from him. See the gun being pulled away from him? Shot. Mr. Huber goes down. Grosswitz flinches, freezes, stops. Hands up. No pull. Mr. Grosswitz is standing like this, and all of a sudden you see him kick his foot back and launch forward. He loads his back foot going forward at Kyle with a loaded Glock handgun. Kyle sees it coming, gets within a couple of feet, he fires. If he's got his hands up and wants nothing to do with Kyle, like everybody else, just back away and you don't get shot. Mr. Grosswitz decides he's going to take him out, and his only regret is stated in the Facebook post. He didn't fire first and emptied his clip in. He's hit in the arm. He's shot at once. He's backing up. That's the last shot. Went through the quickness of those shots from the rock in the head to that fourth shot. He gets up. You still see this individual armed with a board or 2x4 or a fence post. Doesn't shoot at him. This person, he doesn't perceive as a danger. His hands are up. Doesn't shoot at him. Now as he wheels around, watch what this individual does. That's the end of it. Kyle turns around. He turns. That individual steps away from him. No more shots. behind him, continues on his way, trying to turn himself into the police. Trying to get to the end of it. People yelling to shoot him. He doesn't stop because it's not safe. Goes with his hands up to law enforcement.
Hey, he can stop us! Hey, go right here to stop us! Go right here to stop all of them down here! Now, we need to stop them all. Go right here! Yeah!
Continues on. Hands up. You hear the story about the pepper spray. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the case. There was no threatening behavior that started this. Mr. Rosenbaum was hell-bent on causing trouble that night. He did what he did, and he started this. There are tragic parts of it, but Kyle Rittenhouse's behavior was protected under the law of the state of Wisconsin, the law of self-defense. You've heard the instructions, and I'll end with this. You decide on count one. If you decide that his conduct was privileged under the use of self-defense, you don't go on to the lesser included. If it was privileged under self-defense, that affects count two. Both of the things that happened in scene one, as I read earlier, page 9 of the jury instructions. If his conduct was privileged as to Rosenbaum, it's privileged as to Mr. McGinnis. On to the next ones. At scene 2, ladies and gentlemen, there is no evidence whatsoever that he was an active shooter other than Mr. Binger calling him that. And there's no evidence that any of those other individuals who attacked him in the mob that night were attacking an active shooter. He wasn't shooting. And if they want to be the heroes and they want to beat somebody and do what they're going to do to them, they better be right. And they weren't. Kyle Rittenhouse shot Mr. Rosenbaum because he was attacking Kyle. Every person who was shot was attacking Kyle. One with a skateboard, one with his hands, one with his feet, one with a gun. Hands and feet can cause great bodily harm. Sure, the state's going to get up and say, well, he didn't have great bodily harm, so it doesn't matter. That's not the standard. The standard is could cause great bodily harm. My client does not have to take a beating from the hands of this mob or the hands of Mr. Rosenbaum. And Mr. Rosenbaum might be little, but he was a pretty muscular guy. And some 30-some-year-old guy can take a 17-year-old kid 9 times till Tuesday. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a tough choice, but the evidence only leads to one conclusion. That is that Kyle Rittenhouse's conduct on August 25th was privileged based upon the actions of Mr. Rosenbaum and others. There are no winners in this case, but putting Kyle Rittenhouse down for something he was privileged to do will serve no legitimate purpose. I ask you to do this, do justice here under the law of the state of Wisconsin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Let's take about 10 minutes, and please don't talk about the case. Read, watch, or listen to any account.
Okay, guys, I'm going to fast forward. I got to get to the grocery store. All right, I'm fast forwarding. Welcome to the live. Please like, share, subscribe. Turn on your notifications. Okay.
All of the charges out of the event were wrapped up. They can't piecemeal the charges, and to argue that she has a Fifth Amendment right now is ridiculous.
I did say Mr. Zeminski had a Fifth Amendment right, and then the objection came. I did not say Mrs. Zeminski. I can clarify that Mr. Zeminski has a
Well,
Fifth
let's find
Amendment
out
right.
from the report of what was said. I thought it was just Mr.
I think he said that Zeminskis are charged by my
The
office, and they have a Fifth Amendment right.
Did you say the Zeminskis? Both? All right, well then,
I'll clarify.
I'll sustain the objection.
I understand.
All right. All right. Ask the jurors to come back in, please. All right, I've sustained the objection because the statement which was made by Mr. Kraus was not accurate, at least as regards Mrs. Zeminski. Any question? Go ahead, Mr. Kraus.
Ms. Zeminski was charged and convicted by my office. Mr. Zeminski still has pending charges. Attorney Richards knows that he has a Fifth Amendment right to not testify.
Let me ask you to step in the library again, please.
It's not in evidence. 2, 1, wait for the door. 1, it's not in evidence. 2, if he wants to say he has the Fifth Amendment right, they also can grant him immunity. They're the only people who can. And if they're going to say that, I should have a SIR rebuttal to explain it to those 12 people. They hold the keys to Mr. Zeminski testifying or not testifying.
We just heard 2 hours of how terrible Joshua Zeminski was, and the defense wants us to offer him immunity. That's completely our decision.
Mr. Kraus, please.
He still has a Fifth Amendment right. What I'm saying is accurate.
But you know, the questioning, the question you're asking, the Zeminski case has been here on a number of occasions, and it has been either it's been a mutual request to adjourn the case. Who's his lawyer?
Mr. Barber.
Okay, it's been repeatedly requested that it be adjourned, and I assumed or was told, I'm not sure which, it would be adjourned pending the outcome of this case. No, that's not true.
No.
Well, it's not true. It is true that I assumed it. Whether I was told that or not, I don't know.
It's not the same style like Black, Your Honor. It's a different situation. Zeminski's case will go to trial on January 31st.
Well,
That's the plan.
but why was it being adjourned?
I think there was some, we had a witness who was not available at the last trial date, so we needed more time to get them in.
Okay. And Mr. Richards also brings up a point that you have control over the availability of a witness in terms of grant of immunity, but I don't want to get into that because I think on the first point he made, which is that I don't think it's an evidence.
I asked Mr. DeBruin about it.
What did you ask Mr. DeBruin?
I asked Mr. DeBruin that when we were talking about our meeting, that he was going to be a witness against Mr. Zeminski, and that Mr. Binger talked to him mostly about Mr. Zeminski because there's a pending case against Mr. Zeminski.
Say again.
After Mr. DeBruin talked about our meeting on cross-examination, I asked Mr. DeBruin, I believe this was a while ago, I indicated that he was going to be a witness in the Zeminski case, and that Mr. Binger asked him mostly about Zeminski, and why would Mr. Binger ask questions about Mr. Zeminski in an effort to change his statement in the Rittenhouse case? And he had no answer for that.
What's that got to do with
If I'm right.
the district attorney is making, or the defense attorney?
It's that there's an open pending case against him.
There was specific testimony that there was a trial date on January 31st. That came in through Mr. DeBruin, and I actually mentioned it in my closing because it's in evidence that there's a pending case. I'm prosecuting Mr. Zeminski, and the trial's coming up in January. That is in evidence, Your Honor.
It has nothing to do with the amendment, which is what I'm objecting to, him bringing that into this.
I don't know. You're making it sound as if, well, you're making it sound incorrectly so, that Mr. Zeminski is unavailable because of his testimonial privilege. But now Mr. Richards is asking whether he should be allowed a surrebuttal to, so the jury would understand that that is somewhat under the control of the district attorney. But I'm not going to, at this point, I'm not going to get further into that. I'm just going to ask you to move on to something else.
Well, my next line of argument is that the defense named them in their witness list and could have called the Zeminskis.
No, they can't because he's got a Fifth Amendment privilege for the very reason you indicate, and privileges must be claimed as much as possible outside the presence of the jury. That's the statute.
They could have called Kelly Zeminski. They writted her here from prison.
Pardon me?
We had to have a available in case something came up. That doesn't mean we have to call her. We have no obligation to put anybody on the witness stand.
Nor does the state. And
Mr.
Richards commented many times about how we could have called them, which I think was dishonest given the Fifth Amendment issue. But then also I can mention that when he set up and read his witness lists, the Zeminskis were on it, and they have the ability to call them as well.
The witness list is not in evidence.
These are opening statements, and he commented on those multiple times.
I don't.
Okay, what just happened?
Attorney Binger had said he's not in this video as it started, and you don't hear anything from him. And that is true. At the very end, he is seen standing quite a bit away from Mr. Balch and Mr. Rittenhouse. This is where that supposed threat happened. There's a distance between them. Next time the camera pans back, the protesters are pushed back. And you never hear this threat. You hear nothing. And apparently that is what the defense is accepting, is where the threat happened. Although Mr. Rittenhouse actually does not accept that, because he said it happened at Blocker 2 North. So they can't agree on when the threat took place. They can't agree on where the threat took place. And it's the only few seconds of that part of the night that is not on tape anywhere. It's another concoction to give credence or to give weight that, oh, he had to defend himself against an unarmed man. There's been talk about how the defendant came around that Duramax and raised his gun. That didn't seem to be a contested issue in the case until the defendant lied about it on the stand. The defense themselves submitted an exhibit, number 41, in which it is denoted where the person that put that video together indicates Rittenhouse pointing gun at Zeminski's. I think it has a question mark. This was their exhibit. There was testimony from Detective Antaramian. And we showed this drone video. Now, but then the defendant won't admit to it on the stand, and then all of a sudden the defense has to fight it and talk about hocus pocus and make up little clever rhymes. The defendant could have told you the truth, but that hurts his case, and that gives us provocation. Now, I did have on rebuttal, Mr. Armstrong put in two very blurry pictures. Mr. Binger didn't even mention these pictures in his closing because they're maybe the fifth, sixth, or seventh strongest pieces of evidence that Mr. Rittenhouse raised his gun. But the defense is seizing on them. And they inaccurately said that it took him 20 hours of work to do. He worked on that drone video for 20 hours. He made us multiple shorter videos of it. These images were the last part of that work. And that image does show Mr. Rittenhouse holding a gun. It is blurry. Does it show any detail? No. But we thought it important that there at least be some still shot besides these videos. The second one I showed, again, is very blurry, but it's of the shooting. And you see Mr. Rittenhouse blurry, you see the puff of smoke, and you see Mr. Rosenbaum blurry, still very much upright. And that is why those pictures are given. It was the tail end of all the work that Mr. Armstrong did on this video. The defense seems very scared of these pictures because it helps to prove their client lied on the stand, and it shows that he provoked the attack. Now, I would like to show you, I believe this is the full drone video, Exhibit 73. So in this one, it is difficult to see the raising of the gun because it's the full video. I would encourage you, if you find it necessary, to take a closer look at the bigger TV. Please stop it. Now, if you see in this video, Mr. Richards wants to make it seem like the only recourse the defendant has in retreating is walking into this mob of people who are breaking cars. But look at all that open space that he has. At this moment, he could have turned around and ran to that space and gone right back with Sheridan, and everyone would be alive and everyone would be fine. Instead, he decides to start slowing down and run into these cars in which he is supposedly trapped, which would be like being trapped in a Target parking lot. As you see, as we keep playing it, he goes around them no problem, and he goes right into this totally clear space that was available to him the whole time. He did not exhaust his duty to retreat. He did not exhaust all of his options. Now, I'm going to go to the video. I'm going to point something out. Mr. Binger is going to play it again, and I'll show you. This is in relation to Mr. Richards indicated that no one that attacked or that went after Mr. Rittenhouse in the second incident observed the shooting. That is not true. This video shows the person that is referred to as Jump Kick Man leaving the scene. And we have another view as well from another video, but I'll point that out. Get out of the way. This is something good right here. He sees it. He's standing the whole time, and he comes and he helps push the man in the wheelchair onto the seat. So he absolutely was there. He did see what happened. Next. This is Exhibit 10. This is the Ford Fisher video. If you look after the shooting, it shows this individual pushing the wheelchair away from car source 3. There he is across the street, pushing the man in the wheelchair away out of the scene. Hello? This is a video you've seen before. It does look better on the large television, but this is where he comes into the screen. This is one of the videos that Mr. Armstrong cropped for us in his 20 hours of work. This is slowed down by 50%, and it zooms in as good as possible given the limitations of the video. I'll point it out up here, but I said it is better seen on a large TV. There he is pointing the gun. He's not close enough to the car to have that be a factor. He puts on the fire extinguisher, he freezes up. It is. I'll do the next zoom in. Oh, you got it? Again, that really wasn't an issue at trial until the defendant lied about it. Now, Exhibit 84, this is another video that Mr. Armstrong did in his 20 hours of work. And this shows the chase. That's you see him point. Mr. Rosenbaum does his jump. See the defendant slowing down, seemingly preparing to shoot. And look where that first shot is. Go back one more, play one more time. This is the zoomed in image that will eventually was shown. Look how far he's not reaching. He's being shot in the hip and falling. And he goes immediately to the ground, and the defendant sees fit to keep shooting at him, although he poses absolutely no threat. Again, 4 feet from the barrel of the gun, not from Mr. Rittenhouse himself. Here is another video Mr. Armstrong made in his 20 hours of work. I believe he made 6 of them all told. They're all on evidence. Here's a close-up of the final shooting. The puff of smoke is already out. He's already upright. He crumples immediately to the ground, but the defendant keeps shooting him. So did Mr. Rosenbaum turn and get shot in the back that way? No, he was even less of a threat. He was falling face first on the ground with his hips shattered. So yes, he was shot in the back, and he was killed by a shot in the back, and it was the 3rd or 4th shot. Attorney Richards indicated that Nick Smith called the defendant. Nick Smith did not testify to that. He was never asked. We don't know who or who called the defendant to go to that scene. And despite the fact that there's this madman out there who's such a threat and who's going to kill the defendant, he just saunters down there all by himself. No problem. He's not scared. This threat, if it even existed, was not taken seriously. He's a babbling idiot, as Mr. Lukowski said. Mr. Rittenhouse testified he didn't hear anything before he shot. He didn't hear this "fuck you." He didn't factor in the gunshot. There is no evidence that Mr. Huber did anything untowards that evening. They talked about pushing a dumpster, picking up pepper balls. That was not evidence that was ever submitted in this trial. I don't know where it comes from. No evidence that he told Gage Grosskreutz I had to shoot in self-defense. And Attorney Richards talks about how, well, Mr. Detective Howard testified in a certain way and how he didn't talk about the drone footage or anything. He knows we got the drone footage, surprisingly, after Detective Howard testified. Guns do not have handed. There's not a left-handed or right-handed gun. So, yes, the demonstration that Mr. Binger did is how it happened. The defendant was facing that way. He picked it up, and the videos show it. Detective Antaramian reviewed it and saw it and testified to it, and it wasn't an issue until the defendant lied. Videos don't lie, but we know Kyle Rittenhouse does. He lied all that night. A lot has been made about how Gage Grosskreutz had an attorney. How hypocritical from a lawyer to hear someone criticize someone else hiring counsel. Mr. Rittenhouse isn't here alone. He has lawyers. And I apologize that the district attorney's office followed our interpretation of Marcy's Law, which is a fairly recent, especially at that time, constitutional amendment. Gage Grosskreutz is not on trial. He followed the advice of counsel not to turn over his phone, just as anyone who hires counsel can do. They can follow the advice of their counsel. We got his whole video from that night. The defense has seen it. We have it. What else do we need? Text messages from 3 weeks before? They just want to try to dig up dirt because they think it's there, because the defense wants you to believe that these people got what was coming to them. That they were bad people doing bad things, and we should be proud and boastful of Mr. Rittenhouse for killing them. Gage Grosskreutz testified when he heard that he heard I didn't shoot anyone, and Gage Grosskreutz acted on that. He then followed, and when he left Mr. Rittenhouse thinking that he was not involved in the shooting, and started going to the shooting of Mr. Rosenbaum before being told by others that saw it that he was the shooter, and then he returned. So Gage Grosskreutz relied on this statement of Mr. Rittenhouse. We're talking about a rush to judgment. Mr. Rittenhouse turned himself in. Are you supposed to be days, weeks, months to charge murderers who we know murdered people? It's a red herring, as Mr. Binger said. It's throwing up red herrings, false hypocritical arguments, and attacks on those that Mr. Rittenhouse killed to try and distract you from the fact that he was not in imminent fear of death or great bodily harm, and he was not privileged to act how he did. We heard from Ms. Carrie Ann Swart. Now that Nathan DeBruin talked about jail, now you can try to smear Mr. Rosenbaum more, although there really is no dispute, or was no dispute, that he came from a hospital. He's carrying a hospital bag. Ms. Swart testified that she talked to the hospital about how he would be released, that he went to this hospital. She knew he was coming home from the hospital. She knew it was in the bag, and he showed that picture of it backlit against the fire, trying to make it seem sinister. She told how there were medical papers in there. And we did that image again. Mr. Armstrong did this image for us, where you get a little peek in the bag. And I would argue you can see medical papers. So that big image they see looks like rolled up medical records that you get when you're discharged from a hospital. And Ms. Swart testified that he was given medications that day. Perhaps they didn't work. Perhaps there was a bad reaction. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But he was given that day. He could not get the ones for future days because things were closed. Balch did not testify that he thought there was anything sinister in the bag. He said he said something inaccurate at the time, but he said that he saw shampoo bottles and a water bottle. Mr. De Bruin. He did take some nice photographs, and he clearly wanted the world to know that he took some nice photographs. He's really more relevant to Mr. Ziminski. And he apparently, this is the photo of the bag. You can examine that further. Mr. De Bruin must have some problem with police and DA's offices. He goes to the detectives. He doesn't give a full story. He says, he testified to this. This is not me saying anything. He forgot things because he was so nervous because the door of the police station still had an unrepaired window. That caused him such nervousness that he could not give a full statement. He meets with us in a very polite, short meeting. He has very little relevance to this case that we knew about. And yes, we showed him some videos. Is this Josh Ziminski? Oh, no, it's not. Okay, would you see him in these other pictures? Yes. You don't know it's Josh Ziminski? Okay. Somehow that's us getting him to change his statement. What's that? We show him pictures, videos, say, is that Josh Ziminski? I don't know. We show him other pictures. Do you recognize that as the same person? Yes. That's not getting him to change his statement. We had him read a statement. Do you have anything to add to it? No. The next day, he goes over to Mr. Richards' office. All of a sudden, he knows all this extra information that wasn't in his statement. Oh, but he was so nervous meeting with us because we showed him a video or photograph that he took of Joshua Ziminski. And then what does he do? He goes and hires a lawyer very closely connected with a gossip blogger who attacks my office on a regular basis and who is very pro-Rittenhouse. Another just funny coincidence in this case, just like how Mr. Hernandez, who doesn't live in the state, could hire any of the thousands of attorneys in Wisconsin or tens of thousands of attorneys in the state. But no, he hires an attorney who Kyle Rittenhouse's defense team has already paid money to that firm. What a coincidence. So Mr. De Bruin doesn't tell us any information, then tries to attack us, and then tells the defense a lot more information. Mr. Rittenhouse denied pointing a gun at the yellow pants man, said he was being sarcastic. Well, Mr. Richards basically admitted he did point the gun. So which is it? We know that Mr. Rittenhouse was going around that night trying to be a paramedic, a policeman, and a fireman, but not receiving any real training in any of them. Tough job to do all three at once. And he went around with his gun trying to scare people, to intimidate them, to not do minor property damage. He's a chaos tourist. He was there to see what was going on, act important, be a big deal. And in the moment a little bit of that chaos comes back at him, he cowardly shoots a man instead of fighting back. You put yourself in this situation, you know it's going to be out of hand. It gets a little out of hand. Someone is chasing me, and you have to shoot him. That is not privilege. That is not reasonable. And that is not what any reasonable person in the defendant's shoes would have done. We kept him with his rock in his hand. There's no evidence of there being a rock in that hand. Now, there's talk about how the defendant maybe have re-racked his gun. We don't see that in the video. We don't know what he did. But we do know that as Gage Grosskreutz is sitting there with his hands up, the defendant turns over his gun and is looking at it and is doing something with it. Fully reason, the defendant admitted to this, that he looked at the gun. Fully reasonable that Mr. Grosskreutz could have assumed that he was re-racking and preparing to fire. And it does not mean that a unspent shell casing has to be on the ground. Officer Bray testified that she shot AR-15s. She knows AR-15s. There's if it jams and there's an unspent shell casing, the re-racking will take out the unspent shell casing. It does not have to be a live round. I don't know what he was doing with his gun, but it's certainly reasonable for Mr. Grosskreutz to interpret it that way. And then what does he do? He doesn't step back and take a firing position and shoot. He didn't shoot him 5 to 6 seconds earlier when Mr. Rittenhouse was being an active shooter after having killed his second person and shot at his third. You have every right to have stopped Mr. Rittenhouse's activities at that point. But he didn't. He came up closer, he surrendered, and he said, he believed his surrender was not being accepted. Who shoots someone like this? Is he trying to shoot his own hand off? He never does anything about an actual position to shoot that gun. And as Mr. Richards admitted in his closing, when it's pointed at his head, his arm is already blown off. We're supposed to be so scared of Mr. Grosskreutz with his Glock when the defendant is holding a loaded AR-15. And there's this preposterous argument that, Kelly Zeminski is holding a flashlight. It must be to bash heads. Certainly no one carries flashlights at night to walk home in the dark or walk to your car in the dark. I take my dog for a walk. I'm looking to bash in heads? No. We hear about how, this vicious kick that, if you watch it live, did not seem to make much contact. Spun him 180 degrees. That is Kyle tracking him with the gun and shooting at him. He's moving as he's moving. That is not the force of the kick. And the video makes that clear. But again, we're grasping at straws and we're throwing out red herrings. And now, a skateboard is a deadly weapon. Someone should tell all the parents and grandparents and Santa Claus giving skateboards this Christmas about how they're giving their children a deadly weapon. I guess they should get them an AR-15 instead. It's just preposterous. And yes, Mr. Huber was acting heroic in holding down that and taking that skateboard and trying to hold him down and trying to take that gun. And what happened? The gun stayed attached to Mr. Rittenhouse. Because when the defense concocted this, they were trying to take my gun story, they left out that it is literally strapped to him. He shot an unarmed man 4 times because he was so scared that Mr. Rosenbaum was going to take the gun away from him when it was attached to him. It is an absolute red herring. It is an absolute ridiculous argument. Imminent threat. Not, in 5 minutes after we get beat up, then I might be in threat. Imminent threat. You've heard all the videos. I'm not going to go into it any more great length, but when you listen to the crowd as Mr. Rittenhouse is running, they start yelling after he's running when they're screaming, "Get him." Also, as people are approaching him at the end, they're asking, "Why did you shoot him? Why did you shoot him?" These are people that were provoked because they witnessed an attack or heard shots or heard he was attacking, and they took action. As Mr. Binger said, I probably wouldn't do it either. But that they did it is brave, and they did not deserve to be killed. Kyle Rittenhouse is a strong tie as the Kenosha, but he uses Google Maps to find a business he says he's driven by every day. He supposedly knows Kenosha so well and is such a familiar with Kenosha that he doesn't realize you can walk one block either way to get back to the car source. He didn't want to go back to the car source. He wanted to go see what was going on. He wanted to stay in the action. He wanted to continue to do things that would make him feel big and make him feel important. These minor injuries we've heard the defendant have, again, Mr. Richards misstated the standard. It is not could have caused great bodily harm or death. It is not likely to have caused great bodily harm or death. It is imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. Where is that when you get a couple scrapes? Everybody takes a beating sometimes, right? Sometimes you get in a scuffle and maybe you do get hurt a little bit. That doesn't mean you get to start plugging people with your full metal jacket AR-15 rounds and no bullets are not bullets. And we heard testimony about that. Mr. Richards mentioned this in opening, but apparently he's noticed that the evidence doesn't bear it out. He talks about this, how Mr. Rosenbaum put this shirt over his head to hide his identity because he was going to go ambush Kyle Rittenhouse. Well, then obviously watched the videos. He's had that shirt in his head for some time. Whether it's COVID, this is all pre-vaccine as we know. Whether it's tear gas, whether it's fire, whatever it is, he's using it to protect his face, not as some evil plan to get Kyle Rittenhouse. They're setting this fire and they begin walking down Sheridan. There's no evidence that they knew he was coming. There's no evidence that they had any plan to get him. I'd submit to you that the Zeminskis and Mr. Rosenbaum were doing what they were doing all night. They were going to go bash that Duramax or start or stoke a fire. Kyle sees this and then he runs onto the scene. That's clearly FBI video. He runs onto the scene. He puts down the fire extinguisher. He raises up his gun. Mr. Rosenbaum yells, "Gun, gun, gun." Why else would he yell that? It's very possible while he was yelling, "Friendly, friendly, friendly," he's doing so while holding a loaded AR-15 at the Zeminskis. Mr. Rosenbaum was going to chase him out of there to end the danger. And Mr. Richards boasts that, something along the lines, "You won't do shit, motherfucker." Well, Mr. Rosenbaum was wrong. Oh, that's an attaboy right there. Way to kill someone unarmed because you won't engage them. He raises the gun, he provokes the attack. He has to retreat. He has to exhaust all remedies before he regains the right to even use self-defense, not even to use deadly force. That's a whole other separate question. He does regain the use of self-defense if he exhausts all options. He does not. He could have ran a different way. He could have fought. He had all sorts of different ways to exhaust his options. He did not do it. As I said at the beginning of my closing, I don't think you need provocation. An unarmed man chasing you and you shoot him 4 times as he's falling, you kill him as he's falling in front of you because you don't want to physically defend yourself. That's first-degree reckless homicide right there. And Mr. Richards kind of plays games with the name reckless. Reckless means not intentional in this circumstance. And you can read the jury instructions, you can come to your own conclusions. And firing an AR-15 in any circumstance like this shows utter disregard for human life. There's no other explanation for it. If you're shooting an AR-15 at close range of people, you have no disregard for human life. That's not really in any dispute. I want to leave you with this. The meaning of reasonable doubt. I'm going to read portions of this instruction. Obviously, you'll have the whole instruction. The term reasonable doubt means a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt which is based on mere guesswork or speculation. That's what the defense is asking you to do, to guess what Mr. Rosenbaum is doing, to speculate what Mr. Rosenbaum is doing, to speculate and guess what Mr. Huber and this unidentified man were doing. We don't know because he killed two of them. All we can look at is the evidence and see him standing pretty much straight up or exactly straight up when he was shot in the hip and immobilized. A doubt which arises merely from sympathy or from fear to return a verdict of guilt is not a reasonable doubt. The defense's whole case has been trying to stoke sympathy for Mr. Rittenhouse and showing how everyone else was just a terrible person. Every life counts. Every life matters. If people did bad things that night, they could have been prosecuted. It's not up for Mr. Rittenhouse to be the judge, the jury, and eventually the executioner. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt such as may be used to escape the responsibility of a decision. There's a lot going on in this case. We all know that. We all knew that from the day we walked in on November 1st. But this verdict should be about what the facts are and what Mr. Rittenhouse did. That's what the 12 of you who go to deliberate will go and decide. You are the fact finders. You decide what is beyond reasonable doubt. You decide what he is guilty or not guilty of from this menu of options that you now have. An imminent threat. The only imminent threat that night was Mr. Rittenhouse. He was not acting in legal, justified self-defense. He's guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. Members of the jury, the time has now come when the great burden of reaching a just, fair, and conscientious decision in this case will be placed wholly with you jurors selected for this most important duty. You will not be swayed by sympathy, passion, prejudice, or political beliefs. You will disregard any impression which you may have regarding what you believe to be my opinions on the guilt or innocence of the defendant. You will disregard the claims or opinions of any other person or news media or social networking site. You will pay no heed to the opinions of anyone, even the President of the United States or the President before him. The founders of our country gave you and you alone the power and the duty to decide this case based solely on the evidence presented in this court. You will fearlessly keep faith with those who have entrusted to you the fair rendition of justice and the protection of our freedom. You will be very careful and deliberate in weighing the evidence. I charge you to keep your duties steadfastly in mind and as upright citizens to return just and true verdicts. You will decide only whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the offenses which are charged. Any consequences of your verdict are matters for me alone to decide and must not affect your deliberations. It will be for you to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty as to each of the offenses charged or submitted. You must make a finding as to each count of the information. Each count charges a separate crime, and you must consider each one separately. Your verdict for the crime charged in one count must not affect your verdict on any other. This is a criminal and not a civil case, and therefore, before you can reach a verdict which may lawfully be received, it must be reached unanimously. In a criminal case, all 12 jurors must agree in order to arrive at a verdict. When you retire to the jury room, select one of your members to preside over your deliberations. That presiding juror's vote is not entitled to any greater weight than that of any other juror. We're going to stop at this point, and I'm going to ask that you.
Okay, we're going to stop at this point. At the you know what? It's been a real lively exchange with allies and haters alike. Shout out to Joe Pooty and Ahmed. Who else is in here brand new? Well, at least they're brand new to the chat. I want to shout out Atlantic, Creole Department of Defense. Love your comments. I had to get rid of Matt. He clearly has not read not one true history book. You know, he's like many of the white folks and immigrants in this country, trying to tell freedmen, descendants of freedmen, to pull ourselves up by our bootless straps, as if we've not been legislated to the bottom of the Titanic as the anchor of this country's capitalism. As if we, our ancestors, that we don't descend from ancestors who build all the wealth these Mickey Figs eat from. It's humorous and frustrating at the same time. I had to block Matt because I just can't take the ignoramuses in my feed. If you want to come over here and you're an ally, this show is only for freedmen and allies. If you can't check that box, and as Joe Pooty said, if you can't check your privilege at the door before you come in here, you will be blocked. Because I have no time for it. I have no time to be re-traumatized. I have no time with people hurling insults and talking under my bank accounts, talking under my home ownership, as if I don't have the right to speak on behalf of the majority of my people who are clearly on the bottom of the Titanic. So if you can't handle my TR roof, if you can't handle me telling like a TI is, you need not come to this channel. There's a lot of folks that will make you comfortable in your privilege, but I am not her. This is not that. It never will be. I go hard in the paint for freedmen because by and large, we have no friends. And like I told Matt, until you are on the bottom in every category in the country our ancestors built with their lives, you don't get a say-so in telling us anything about victimization. You don't get to make us out to be victims. You clearly don't know enough. You clearly need to go to Amazon and buy some history books. You need to clearly understand this is why what you descend from doesn't want true American with 3 Ks history taught in the schools. Because when you know true American with 3 Ks history, you don't come up in my chat with that dumb-ish. You come in here with an understanding and with loads of respect. You bow down to freedmen. And you say thank you. And how can I help you in your fight for your reparations in the quadrillions over multi-generations? You don't come over here on the reparationist perspective with your white privilege, with your POC white privilege, and try to get me together and try to blame my people for their circumstances. You don't get to do that over here. You will be blocked. Now, we can respectfully agree to disagree. We can do all those kinds of things. But you will not traumatize the freedmen who are patrons of this channel. I will block you when you get out of hand. Just know that you will be dismissed back into the nothingness from whence you came if you come over here and try to make freedmen out to be victims, as if we're not pulling ourselves up by our bootless straps. I would ask you, how in the world did we go from 4 million after being raped on breeding farms to over 40 million if We were not pulling ourselves up by our bootless straps every time white folks chose to lynch, to burn down everything we worked so hard to build. So if you are like a Matt and you come over here in this chat with the foolishness, you will be blocked. You're not welcome here. You are a part of the problem. Now, I was asked if I have a blog. No. My shows are my blog. I got about 300 of them, I think, by now. So please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. I've got quite a few more shows to bring you guys. I may do it like this. Sometimes you'll see me, sometimes you can't, because it's a lot to get makeup ready and to get Dawn to come to you. But I got so much stuff I got to talk about. Biden just gave protections to the Native Americans. I got so much puckery to bring you that I can't really afford to be down. So I'm going to have to make a compromise. Sometimes you'll see me live. Sometimes you'll see my avatar like you see right now. Okay? That's what I'm speaking into. I may put a picture up there. I may change it out on occasion, but that's it for now. So I got to go to the grocery and feed my daughter. But basically what you saw here, I had to get the closing because I couldn't sit through the entire trial like I did Mr. George Floyd. But I did want you guys to see whiteness on full display. You know, this judge has been getting death threats because of how racist he is, how partial he is to defense. So I showed this because it is imperative for Freedmen to understand that if this boy gets acquitted for murdering white folks, woe be unto the Freedmen. Woe be unto us. This will pretty much be ending. This will be pretty much giving qualified immunity to the deputized. If this boy with an AR-15, who was not even old enough to carry, gets away with murder. I need Freedmen to understand what's next for us if this boy gets away with murder. And that's why I wanted to hear the closing. No, the prosecution kind of sucked by and large, but he hit some very important points. And he was the last to be able to speak. Defense couldn't come back after that. So if you want to rewatch it and find all the holes and all the lies, prosecution, they aren't the sharpest tools, sharpest knives in the drawer, but they did a pretty good job blowing up the pity party that the defense has been staging from the time they came into the courtroom to try to excuse this disgusting pig of a racist of what he did at a Black Lives Matter movement, all the while painting us out to be rioters. I didn't see many Black folks burning trash cans and ish. And this is what's so problematic when Black Lives Matter come out to peacefully protest. These type of stupid ass white folks get involved and come through and destroy shit that Freedmen get blamed for. This becomes an excuse to execute us. Did you see that AR-15 rifle swinging off of Kyle RittenKKRACKER? How he walked towards the police? Could a Freedman walk towards the police with an AR-15 rifle, hands in the air, swinging off our shoulder? Could we walk towards the police to surrender? Or would they have sprayed 1 million bullets in us? That's what you need to understand. That if this boy gets acquitted, it will mean that they can execute Freedmen, race soldiers and deputized alike, and be protected under the law. They'll get to be tried and get to walk. That's what this means. So that's why I showed it, because I need for everybody to understand what this is really all about. So let's all pray that he gets all the time thrown at his ass, that he never sees the light of day. That's my solemn prayer, that he never sees the light of day. I don't feel like we have that kind of judge that will throw the book at his ass, but that's my prayer anyhow. He deserves to be under the jail, and we need to stop him so we can stop the state-sanctioned execution of freedmen. Since Biden, Jim Crow Joe, segregationist Jim Crow, sloppy, creepy Joe, will not put an end to qualified immunity while giving all these other groups protection, then we need some semblance of a jury that will find him unanimously guilty of murder in the first degree. Okay, he's trying to plead self-defense. What's up, Sandra Del Reed 360? I see you, fam. Yeah, they're trying to make it like he was in self-defense mode. So I'm telling you, we need guilty, because this will greenlight the other dumbasses like Kyle RittenKKRACKER and give them a license to kill us and go to court and walk. If this jury doesn't bring back a guilty verdict on all accounts, I don't trust this judge to throw the book at him, but he definitely needs to do time. Quiet as it's kept, Chauvin should have gotten several lifetimes, but that was a black man that he murdered. That was a black man that he executed. That was a freedman that he executed. And he got what, 29 years? So I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know I'm going to come back and tell you the way I see it about the judge being threatened. I don't agree with threatening judges, but it's about to get real ugly, because now white folks is mad with white folks over this boy and how he murdered those people. Okay, they were unarmed. So this should get interesting. The cops should have got the death penalty, but the Dems banned it. I don't know. Listen, the Democrats and the Republicans are not friends of freedmen. Watch how many immigrants' grandchildren look like Drake. Atlanta Creole Department of Defense is still going hard for how, we're going to be a brown country one of these days. It doesn't really matter what color if you are if you've been neutralized economically and now they're coming for your vote. Color doesn't matter. If you've been neutralized economically, you have no power. So it doesn't matter if we have a bunch of yellow kids running around here from everybody intersexing and intermarrying. That matters not. What matters is our reparations in the quadrillions over multi-generations into perpetuity for our descendants of freedmen and women and children. Okay? That's what my fight is all about. So if you're an ally, you're welcome. If you're a freedman, you are welcome. Look at Cali. The black vote is after. I don't see what the rest of that says. They want to dilute the black vote. Oh, no, they don't want to dilute it. They're well on their way to diluting it, because guess why? We've awakened, and we're not going to deliver these Democrats. If you look at the Freedmen vote, it's trending more and more towards the Republicans, the Republican Party. Najee Hall, I see you. The mother should stand trial as well. Yes, she should, Najee. You're absolutely right. She should stand trial as well. It's unfreaking believable how they get away with murder. Okay? But yeah, they're coming for the vote by flooding the country with immigrants. They're literally giving illegals Ivy League education, giving illegals jobs before they'll hire freedmen. And so this is why me and my comrades fight. We are going to be fighting until our last breath. This is why the movement takes catnaps. Atlanta Creole says, through race mixing, we are becoming the majority. No, we're not, sweetheart. We're not becoming the majority by race mixing. Do you understand that there are a lot of people of color, minority, white oppressors? You have to hate freedmen to get into this country or have a gang of money. That's it, and that's all. So please don't think we're winning because we got a bunch of mixed kids running around this country. It matters not until we kill white supremacy, until we kill racism, until we get these reparations. It don't matter what color you are. It matters if you've got power. And the only way to have power is to have money and to have your sovereignty. We need to become sovereign and separate ourselves from these immigrants and these white folks, like the Indians. That's what we need to do with our reparations. When we mix the offspring, don't stop being freedmen. Well, it doesn't matter if we mix and that they are freedmen on paper. Are they freedmen in their hearts? If they're raised white and they behave white, they hate themselves, ergo they hate us. So it doesn't matter. Race mixing doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they identify on paper to get the reparations. It matters what's in their heart and how they treat their people. Do they use their whiteness to get in spaces and leave their people in the gutter? Okay, that's all that matters to me. I don't care what color you are. You're either a freedman or you're an ally. Color doesn't matter to me. Social justice and economic inclusion matters to me. So there you have it, family. I'm going to jump off now. I do want to bid you guys a beautiful evening. I'm going to try to come back on with a couple of more stories. I don't know about tonight. I'm a little tired. I do a lot of advocacy outside of this. But I do thank you for the lovely spirited exchange in the chat. It's been real, chatting with some of our white allies and nuking our enemies. Only one. Matt had to go. I had to block his ass forever. I'm not for it. Don't come in this feed doing nothing to Freedmen. Don't talk sideways to Freedmen. You better humble yourself. And like Joe Pooty said, check your privilege at the motherfucking door. With that being said, family, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever Freedmen and its allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God. You are the voice of God. You are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. And with that being said, family, until next time, you make it a beautiful, God-inspired rest of your evening. Stay tuned for the outro, family. Peace. Love you, black and strong. Yes, I do.